fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's going the outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson! Anderson's up to
Oh my god! Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go! Oh no!
That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
And a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SimSpeed TV network. This is Season 9, Week 5 of the just-ended iRacing series presented by Logitech G, custom track art, and owned 3D game streaming. My name's Lachlan Mansell, one of your commentators tonight. The other commentator who will be joining me very shortly is Bo Albert, and this evening we're headed to Oran Park Raceway in the classic Australian circuit, and we're headed there in the Audi RS3 TCR car. A few interesting changes to the format tonight, not least of which a restriction of just 15 litres of fuel that each driver is allowed to have on board their TCR car at any one time, which means that we'll be seeing each driver making no less than 2 pit stops throughout tonight's 40-minute race. Very good evening to Bo Albert. And Bo, going to be some interesting strategies to play out tonight with that fuel restriction for each car.
No, absolutely. 15 litres in a car like this does not get you very far at all. So for these drivers, normally in Just Send It, it is about being as fast and aggressive as you can possibly be on the racetrack. But really tonight, it's all about how fast and aggressive can you be in the pit lane, because you're going to be seeing it at least twice in this race. And of course, safety cars are always going to throw in a couple of variables left, right, and center as well, just to make the fuel situation even more complicated than it already is. So I'm looking forward to how the drivers play that tonight, because there are so many different ways you can go about it.
In the research that we did in the lead up to tonight's race, my housemate Brian Vanderwacker, who is competing, and myself, we worked out that you can get about 12 laps or about 14 and a half minutes out of a tank of fuel, which means that you will have to pit a couple of times during the race. But the big unknown, of course, is safety cars. How many will we have? Will we have any at all? That's the thing that's going to determine what happens strategically tonight.
Absolutely, and it's quite a tough circuit, is Oran Park Raceway. There's a lot of tight and twisty sections where, really, if you're going to go for a pass, it has to be compliant by both drivers, and we all know in Just Send It, that's not always the case. The drivers love to get the elbows out. There's always a bit of door banging, and in these TCR cars, you're actually almost encouraged to door bang a little bit, such as the brute nature of them and the very easy to nature to actually save these cars. When you get a bit of oversteer in this car, it's not a case of desperately fighting opposite lock to get it. Really, all you have to do is plant your right foot and away you go. You're generally 9 times out of 10 okay. So for these drivers, they can lean on the car a lot more than they usually would.
On screen at the moment, one of the young guns who's competing tonight, Hugh Barter, who's part of the Evolution racing team in the Panther Race Fuels Audi RS3 TCR car. Good to have him along for the ride this evening. We've got some other high-profile drivers in the field, and it's our 2 championship leaders, Brenton Hobson and Ryan Wood, who have locked out the front row of the grid, remembering that we are actually running an official championship for Just Send It this year. And it's Brenton Hobson, when we go to the adjusted points score, who holds the ascendancy within that championship at the moment. As right on cue, up come our championship points. Brenton Hobson, your leader, ahead of Ryan Wood. Hobson getting his 4th round win of the season last week. Wood second, Mitchell McLeod, who picked up a race win earlier on in the year at Phillip Island, in 3rd. And then it's Emerson Harvey, Kobe Williams, Mario Vartanian, Tyson McAvoy, Steve Jansen, Christian Lindbom, and Job Stewart completing your top 10 with 2 dropped rounds in play so far. Of course, when we get to the end of the 12 rounds, we'll be dropping each driver's 4 worst results of the season.
Absolutely, and it's amazing how tight of a championship we've got, because we have no right to have such a competitive championship in Just Send It with the amount of variables and everything going on. But what it has done is all the drivers have actually ended up on a very equal footing, and we've got a very good championship fight, especially with the top 2 duking it out. But also a couple of drivers just a few points away, like Mitchell McLeod in 3rd place as well. It's a very nice little pack as we have a look at our starting order.
So it is our championship protagonists, Ryan Wood and Brenton Hobson, on the front row of the grid, only 0.03 of a second separating them in qualifying. Harrison Dengate and Mitchell McLeod, your second row, back to the ever-consistent Mario Vartanian and Steve Jansen. Tyler Howard and Reece Cohen in positions 7 and 8. Good to have Lockie Manif back tonight in the Just Send It series. He'll go from 9th on the grid ahead of Matt Morris.
Kicking things off from position number 11 is Christian Lindbaum, who shares the row with Brian Vanderwacker on row number 6. Byron Phillips, Hayden Veld and Bradley Vaughan are our top 15, with Daniel Yeaman, who's always competitive and moves forward in these races, in 16th, Jonathan Bykoff, Christina Nazarick, Ryan Ulham, and also Jaden Russell, the top 20.
Back then to Hugh Barter, Tyson McAvoy, Joel Chigavazira and Aidan Brand, Tom Wilkinson and Tim Mitchell, Ian Quass, Matthew Kefford, one of our administrators, Simon Black there on the grid sheet as well, Eddie Beswick completing at the top 30 in terms of our grid positions.
Absolutely. Now the pace car is rolling off on what is amazingly one of the shortest pace laps you will ever see in iRacing. So we do have a pace lap, but already we're rounding into the final corner, and the pace car will pull off any moment now and leave the field in control of the 40 car of Ryan Wood and Brenton Hobson on the front row.
Looking forward to getting underway for the rolling start, as it will be our pole sitter Ryan Wood who will control the pace of the field here as they head down the main straight. He slots in ahead of Brenton Hobson to take the early lead. Hold your breath as this big field of TCR cars file through turn number 1, straightening the car up hard under brakes. For turn number 2, a few moves and a bit of nose-to-tail contact a bit further back in the pack, with a couple of cars already getting speared off the racetrack.
Yep, one of them was Mario Vartanian, and oh, again, big impact, car almost rolling under the bridge. That was Ryan Ullum, and he has had a monumental accident on lap 1, big damage to his TCR car. And let's not forget, this car features the new damage model, so as you can see, it is a lot more crumpled up than usual. That is big damage. And when you get a replay of that, we're going to see some very frightening scenes there. Oh, it actually got lifted a lot more on my screen, but still a big impact there and plenty of damage on the 17 car.
Looks there like there were a couple of cars that were already off the road under the bridge there, and that he might have just been taking a bit of evasive action. But here we go, the two drivers who've been battling it out all season long at the front of the field, as we see a couple of cars going wide at turn number 9, Sutton's Corner, a few running side by side over the dog leg. That's hard to do through there. Massive respects being shown by a couple of those drivers there to ensure that they were able to get through, running door to door through the dog leg. And already a couple of pit lane visitors as well. These are drivers that have damaged, and Hugh Barter and Hayden Veld side by side on the main straight, with Veld getting squeezed right out into the grass and having to get out of the throttle and tuck back in behind Hugh Barter by the time they got to turn 1.
Very interesting rejoin there by Christian Lindbaum, who was so far off at turn number 1. I think they may as well have been on an entirely different circuit. We're getting a look now, and you can see Christian Lindbaum was just well and truly off the road after contact through that little left-hand kink and has been sent a long way off. And then the rejoin got a little close for comfort with a few other drivers as well. But nonetheless, everyone's still continuing on the race, so fair play in terms of just send it.
And the thing about those drivers who've had to come in early with damage, the problem for them is that it's actually too early for them to make it to the end of the race on 2 pit stops based on the fuel numbers that we've calculated. So those drivers who've already done an early pit stop potentially going to have to come back into the pits 2 more times to get through to the checkered flag. All of the people who are smart, all of the people who've done the sums, they'll have a critical lap number in their head, which will be the earliest stage of the race that they can pit, and then be able to make it through to the checkered flag on only 1 more stop. Now, based on the research that Brian and myself did early on, we reckon that it's probably around 8 or 9 laps is the earliest opportunity at which you can pit, and then only need 1 more stop to make it through to the finish. So it'll be something for us to keep our eye on as the race progresses. But how's this battle? Tyler Howard, Matt Morris, Steve Jansen and Lockie Manif all going at it, hammer and tongs here.
Yeah, they got very close through turn number 1, didn't they? They're all fighting away for positions. They've settled down through this middle phase of the lap, but they're still nose to tail just about, as Lockie Manif in particular really looking at the back of Steve Jansen as they work their way through this section of the track, which has so much elevation change. We'll get a good view of it here as we go on board with Lockie Manif. You can see the amount of wheel work required as someone's done a little bit too much wheel work, and that's Reece Cohen who's found himself in the barrier. He'll continue on in this race, but damage front and rear to that car. So a bit of a disaster there for him as we go back to Steve Jansen. This is one of the real points of the circuit where you have to maximize your exit because it leads onto this really long front straight, and Steve Jansen's done a very good job, and Matt Morris looking a little bit vulnerable as they head towards the ultra high speed turn number 1, but Steve Jansen rolls out of the throttle and his fuel saving, and boy, how many drivers are thinking that right now?
Yeah, I think there are a few that might try and get through the race on only one stop, as we see a replay of what happened to Race Cohen just on the approach up to turn 9. Sutton's corner got the right wheels out in the grass at the turning point, and that flicked him around into the Armco. As we ride back on board with Steve Jansen, who's still in behind Matt Morris there, the contest for positions 6 and 7, just ahead of these two, is Tyler Howard as well. And what you were saying there before, Bo, about the camber changes and the elevation changes, these TCR cars are quite stiffly sprung, and depending on the angle that you hit curbs, the cars do bottom out quite hard, and that can cause you just to temporarily lose some steering control through a couple of corners, as well as we've got a big incident once again at Sutton's corner, and yet again it involves Christian Lindblom and a few other cars getting caught up in that one as well.
That was a monumental accident, almost a head-on there. That is not what we like to see, as we get a replay to see how exactly this happened. And look at this for a battle pack. I believe that might be Hugh Barter attacking or being fought with by Christian Lindblom as they go up the inside there. Just run out a little bit of space. Contact is made, and they're getting turned, still getting turned, rolls back and collects 1 and 2 more cars. And then the rejoin by Lindblom, I've got to say, it's not the best I've ever seen. And understandably, Tom Wilkinson on the radio, far from impressed there.
Yeah, a bit of pandemonium there. That all started when Lindblom was trying to go down the inside of Hugh Barter at turn 7. Barter then had the inside for the next corner at turn number 8, which is how Lindblom found himself getting turned around. And Wilkinson, understandably, not impressed with that rejoin from Christian Lindblom as Matt Morris continues to hold off this freight train of cars. It's now Lockie Manif and Lockie Manif's a bit further back. Steve Jansen is behind Matt Morris, and Brian Vanderwacker's made up some ground on that battle as well. We are about to complete, what lap are we up to? Lap number 5 being completed by our race leaders. So still probably another few laps, I think, before you'll see our front runners start to think about taking pit stops.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to be the drivers that everyone's watching. When do the leaders go into the pits? When do they react? And, which drivers can maybe benefit on when the leaders pit and try and lead a few more laps and get themselves into some clean air. There's plenty of strategy to play out at the moment, even though your race leaders are some 4 seconds clear of third place, as Byron Phillips in third place is having his hands full at the moment in a big ding-dong battle. And Harrison Dengate there really fighting hard at the moment, trying to wrestle that position away as they work their way over the infamous Oran Park Bridge, which is always quite a unique spectacle in the world of Australian sim racing. But nonetheless, a great pass by Byron Phillips to move up onto third place in this particular lap.
Yeah, good job there. Unfortunately, those two have both lost a bit of ground to our race leaders, who are now some 6.3 seconds further up the road. As we're having a look, Hugh Barter, he's been caught out by that tie wall under the bridge. It's an easy trap to fall into there. If you run a bit wide out of turn number 2, you can just clip the tie wall on the outside, which is what has happened to Hugh Barter there, and it's caused him to go firing off the road under the bridge, and it looks like he might have been having a bit of trouble there just getting that car turned around. He's now fallen off the lane lap. In fact, there's only 21 cars left on the lane lap at this stage. Such has been the drama that we've seen in the early stages of this race.
It has certainly been a very frantic start indeed. We've seen plenty of drivers. You can see just how easy that particular incident that we saw for Hugh Barter is to do, as Harrison Dengate gets 2 wheels in the dirt and the car just wants to be dragged out all the way to that tyre wall, which is willing to grab your car and throw it to bits at the if the opportunity presents itself. So Harrison Dengate gets away with it where Hugh Barter does not, and he can continue in his pursuit of third place at the moment. But yeah, absolutely, they've fallen off of our race leaders right now, who are in a league of their own. Ryan Wood doing a great job out front. Some very strong pace being set by both of them, but last lap around it was in the favour of Brenton Hobson, just trying to keep that gap down. But Byron Phillips is in no way, shape or form, and what a beautiful shot that is, as we can really see the elevation change there around this circuit. And like you say, very stiffly sprung cars, so the car's getting thrown around all the time over every single bump. But you did say at the end of lap number 8, we might start to see a couple of pit stops by a few drivers. Well, the leaders and our top few cars are now starting lap number 8. And Mitch McLeod, why not at the end of lap number 7?
Yeah, that's going to be cutting it a bit fine, though. He's going to have to do some serious fuel saving and probably rely on there being at least one safety car intervention if he's to make it to the end of the race from that point. So, a bit of a risk there for Mitchell McLeod, but he'll be hoping that he can get some clear track by virtue of coming into the pits earlier than some of his rivals, and that will pay dividends for him a bit later on, as this freight train's really starting to form up now behind Byron Phillips in what will be the contest for position 3. You can see why Ryan Wood and Brenton Hobson are the top 2 drivers in the championship, though, can't you? Because they are in a class of their own at the moment. They're now more than 7 seconds ahead of the battle for the final podium position, and it's no wonder that they're the 2 drivers who are battling it out for the championship. Brenton Hobson, of course, very experienced sim racer. Ryan Wood, a New Zealander, who's also a very accomplished real-life motorsport competitor, racing in the New Zealand Toyota 86 series.
Yeah, some very good talent in this series, and there always has been in Just Sender. We always seem to get a lot of very, very strong drivers from all kinds of different backgrounds, and that's what I think really helps this series grow and be so strong, is the fact that it's so many different drivers from so many different backgrounds. So with the fact we're always changing the cars and tracks, those strengths and weaknesses are always being played out, as Harrison Dengate is really playing chicken with that tire ball there, as at the moment playing chicken on the brakes is Matt Morris, and that is the most aggressive lineup the inside I've seen for some time, and Tyler Howard sadly finds the worst of it. I've got to say, I don't know how much that move was on. His car was almost 4 wheels on the grass there, but for Tyler Howard now, all kinds of under attack from Brian Vanderwacker as we get a replay, and Matt Morris here, just sort of, it was kind of there, but it was a very, very inside line.
Oh, some really, really good evasive action there. That was Steve Janssen having to slip to the inside to get up the inside, as we see Lachlan Manif rounding up Brian Vanderwacker as well. So Lachlan Manif up into 8th position. Bit of other news as well on Brian Vanderwacker. He has gone on the record as saying that if he wins Just Send It tonight, he will do a shoey. And not only that, he'll let me film it to put it on social media. So stand by for that if Brian Vanderwacker should emerge victorious this evening, as we have now completed lap number 9 and the pit stops are starting. So Brenton Hobson pits out of 2nd position behind Ryan Wood. So the first of the real front runners to come in for a scheduled pit stop. And that, based on the number crunching that we've done, is pretty much the earliest opportunity for you to pit and get to the end of the race should it run drain all the way through from here to the checkered flag.
And that's the thing, is that Brenton Hobson always seems to be one of the first people to pit in these races. So if that safety car does flare up at any time, he's not getting caught out by it. He's always early. He's always making sure he plays it conservative. And sometimes that's what you need to do to win championships. And that is why he is currently a championship leader over Ryan Wood, who is coming around the final corner now. We'll see if he decides to react to Brenton Hobson, and the answer is no. He's quite content with being out front, so he will lead lap number 10 and continue on to go on to his 11th lap now. So plenty of differing strategies at the moment, but I've got to say it is a bit aggressive by Ryan Wood to keep going, especially when your championship leader has gone for an early and safe pit.
Yeah, pretty much everybody else is choosing to stay out at the moment, so the bulk of the rest of the field opting to run a bit longer into this first stint. So, again, as we discussed earlier, the maximum number of laps that you can get out of the 15 litres of fuel that you're allowed to have was 12. So, within the next couple of laps, I would expect that we might see a flurry of pit stops because everybody will be out of fuel.
Yeah, and that is not something we need to see, but I do wonder if anyone's going to get caught out by that, just trying to stretch the field that extra 1 lap too long when we get someone stranded on the circuit. It would be typical Just Send It, I think, but nonetheless, the driver's doing well at the moment. As we take a look at Eddie Beswick there with a very beaten up car, and just behind him is Brenton Hobson, so a little bit of traffic just in front for a Hobo 88, so we have to be mindful of that. Tim Mitchell and Eddie Beswick, of course, no slouches. But Ryan Wood finally, at the end of lap number 11, elects to dive into the pits.
Be interesting to see where he rejoins the race relative to Brenton Hobson, of course. Byron Phillips is going to stay out, so too is Harrison Dengate, who's under huge pressure from Matt Morris. Morris getting the run down the inside as they head into turn one. Dengate trying to hang tough around the outside, but that'll be difficult to do. When they get to turn two, lay under brakes, door-to-door contact, and it's Dengate that gets shuffled out wide.
Absolutely, as Brenton Hobson rounds the final corner, and we've not seen Ryan Wood budge just yet. Across the start-finish line goes Hobbo, as off for the jacks comes the driver of Ryan Wood. It's going to be very close. It's going to be seriously close. Under brakes into turn number one, and Hobbo 88, they make contact, and off, not quite, goes the driver of Ryan Wood. A big impact to the rear of the car there. But Hobbo doing the sportsman-like thing, just staying behind when he definitely could have got that position. But boy, oh boy, that could have been so much worse for the two of them.
It's hard, isn't it? Because Ryan was just accelerating up to speed, and Brenton Hobson would have been fully committed. The thing down there at turn number two is that you're still somewhat turning while you're also on the brakes. So it's not an easy thing to do to get the car straightened up through turn one and then get it pulled up for turn number two. So when you're fully committed through there, as Brenton Hobson was, not an easy thing to do to get the car pulled up without being able to make contacts there, as we see a flurry of pit stops now happening. Everybody will be out of fuel at this point because we have completed 12 laps, although in saying that, Matt Morris and Hayden Veld, they'd start out on track. So both Matt Morris and Hayden Veld getting exceptional fuel range to be able to stretch another lap out of their current fuel load.
Absolutely. We'll see if they're coughing in the pit lane at all, but if they're not, then this might be a little bit of a genius call there, because of course, ideally, these cars are way too long in the pit lane when it comes to changing tyres. They take some 40 plus seconds to change tyres, so all the drivers were keeping the same set the entire way through the race. So if you can look after your tyres by being on the lightest fuel load possible as long as you can, that's going to benefit your tyre life, and you may have a slightly stronger car towards the end of the race, because these TCR cars, especially on the fronts, do burn through their tyres quite rapidly. So for Matt Morris and Hayden Veld, that might not be the full intention of their strategy, as Matt Morris does dive into the pit lane this time around, but that will definitely be something that could benefit him. And Hayden Veld's coughing as well out of the final turn, so it's very, very tight if he's going to make it, and he does. But his car was coughing and spluttering at that final corner, and you can see there he's not the fastest car I've ever seen in the pit lane here.
Just as well, it's a downhill slope through pit lane, isn't it? Because he's going to need gravity to be on his side, as we've got Tyler Howard, who was running inside the top 10 off the road at Sutton's corner. So he'd emerged in the middle of that battle that involved Byron Phillips, I think Hayden Veld, Steve Jansen as well, but he's actually done that on his own up at Sutton's corner, Tyler Howard, so backs it into the wall. There'll be a bit of damage to his car as Matt Morris rejoins the racetrack just in behind Mitchell McLeod and just ahead of Harrison Dengate. So that's actually not a bad outcome there for Matt Morris. He's emerged in a pretty competitive position, and because he has managed to get that extra lap out of the tank in the first stint, it potentially means that he'll get a shorter second pit stop a bit later on. So that could work out to Matt Morris's advantage in the long term.
Absolutely, and of course running in 5th place at the moment, but almost no gap to 3rd place, and also almost no gap from 2nd to 1st place. Hobbo is still applying the pressure to the back of Ryan Wood, and both these cars carrying a few little scars now, so they're not going to be the most fun to drive as they were in the first phase of this race. So that's something we've got to be mindful of, as well as some of them might have slight straight line speed damage, but Hobbo still applying plenty of pressure at the moment as they make this long run into turn number 1.
So with the first round of pit stops complete, and it's Ryan Wood from Brenton Hobson, Steve Jansen's been a big beneficiary of that first pit stop cycle because he's moved up into position number 3. And at the moment, Steve Jansen's actually the fastest driver on the racetrack as well. Minute 11.5 for him last time around, quicker than at both of the race leaders. So interestingly enough, the 3 drivers that were on the podium in the supercars at Imola last week, exactly the same 3 drivers who currently occupy the top 3 positions in the TCR cars at Oran Park this week.
Absolutely. Sometimes cars just seem to suit certain people, and the TCR is certainly benefiting those drivers, as we can see that once again. But of course, the fuel save element is a very tricky thing, as I just watching Brenton Hobson, who almost dropped the car off the road, got his right rear tyre in the grass, and we've seen so many drivers suffer and find themselves in a world of pain after that. So lucky to get away with it, as these top two are just sort of playing games with each other at the moment. But Hobbo, being in second place right now and so close to your race leader, is a prime opportunity to fuel save, and I think that's what he'll be doing at this point. I don't think he's really attacking for the race lead. He's just enjoying being in second place, and we'll take a look at his speed through turn number 1, and he wasn't fuel saving all too much. Definitely no lift into turn 1 at least, so maybe he is going max attack and ignoring everything I'm saying.
So based on our calculations, we estimated the race distance, provided there were no safety cars, would be 33 laps. If that's the case, it means the earliest that you can take your second pit stop and make it to the end based on fuel range is lap number 21. So lap number 21, we think, is when the pit window will open for everybody to start taking their second round of pit stops.
Yes, indeed. So not long to go now as well, as the race is now over, or just about to tick over half race distance. And definitely plenty of strategies going on. We've already seen that in the first stint, where some drivers went much longer than others. We saw Hobbo being one of the first pitters in as well. So how does that affect how they pit in the second stint, and which drivers can get a good gain out of that? Already we're seeing Matt Morris 5 places from where he started, and a lot of that is simply just down to his fuel strategy.
How good have these battles been, though, between Ryan Wood and Brenton Hobson this season? We saw an epic contest between them in the Porsche Carrera Cup car at Montreal a fortnight ago. We saw another really, really good battle between them in the supercars at Imola last week, and yet again they find themselves nose to tail in the TCR cars. So it doesn't seem to matter what track we're at or what car we're in, it's always these two drivers who seem to be putting on a show for us right at the front of the field.
No, absolutely, and it's great for that. Of course, I always like to think back to that amazing battle they had in the Porsche Carrera Cups at Montreal, as Harrison Dengate is not having a good battle with the tyre wall at the moment. And we'll have a look at how this has happened. I've got a feeling it's going to be assisted there, because as we can see, there is a big battle going on between himself and Lockie Mineef into towards turn number 1. And how does this go? Oh, contact to the fastest point of the corner. And when you're in the dirt, cars don't stop, and that is actually very hard into the wall for Harrison Dengate, and that is a big disappointment for him, as he finds himself now in the pit lane. But back to my point before, of course, Montreal, the big highlight between these two, Hobbo and Ryan Wood, and once again they're putting on another spectacle for us. First and second in the championship, first and second in the race. They just don't stop providing the entertainment, and I'm really interested to see how this season ends up panning out, especially when we factor in drop rounds. There's a bit of a readjustment to the rear bumper there for Ryan Wood.
Fantastic contesters up the inside. Brenton Hobson, a big think about it there at turn number 3, but Ryan Wood later on the brakes and was able to keep the door shut. Poor Harrison Dengate there coming into contact with Lachlan Mineef at turn number 1. I can't help but feeling there that Harrison Dengate probably just needed to give Lachlan Mineef a bit more room, because Mineef was well alongside him when they reached the turning point for turn number 1. Unfortunately, Dengate, who had been having a strong run up to that point, back in the pits, but just the precision, the mistake-free driving that we've seen lap after lap from these two front runners, Ryan Wood and Brenton Hobson, it's so impressive, and it's so hard to do over long periods of time as well. Right now, Brenton Hobson probably just conserving a little bit. He'll be content to sit in behind Ryan Wood, or will he? He pulls out, he has a look down the inside on the main straight. I might have to eat my words here, because Brenton Hobson will take the track position if he can get it, but no, he decides to tuck back in behind. Of course, there is still another round of pit stops to go. There's still 17 and a half minutes left, and Brenton Hobson won't want to show his full potential too soon.
And I think that's another thing that makes these two drivers so exciting, is every time we think that we know what they're going to be doing, they go and do something completely different again. As Mitchell McLeod, again, one of the earliest drivers to dive into the pit lane, 18 minutes or thereabouts to go in this race. So a long way to go there for Mitchell McLeod. So we'll see if he can do a bit of a fuel save and make it all the way home as we're looking at 15 laps to go. So that's some more than 14. Look at the body language of these two as they fire the car across that middle section. And again, Hobbo 2 wheels in the dirt. What we might do is get on board of this, because I think we're going to see just a little bit of wheel work here from Brenton Hobson over this super high speed right-hander. It's a lot tighter than you actually think. And he just drifts out a little bit wide and, a little bit twitchy. But in all honesty, the front-wheel drive of the car really saved him there because, of course, didn't have to, counter-correct the oversteer all too much. He was just able to put his foot down and the car swung itself back into place.
Yeah, you wouldn't have liked to have been in a rear-wheel drive car for that one. So just on Mitchell McLeod, so he has come in for his second pit stop after 18 laps. And quite frankly, I think that's probably about 3 laps too soon. But unless there's a safety car, I really think that Mitchell McLeod will probably struggle a bit to make it to the finish from there. He really needs a safety car at this stage to have any chance of having enough fuel to get to the end. As Lachlan Manif goes off the road, that's down at turn number 2.
Yep, and a couple of headlight flashes on the exit. So was there any assistance by the fact that he's fairly alone on track at the moment? I'm going to assume he has not been assisted, and that is just too... I don't know if that's too fast in turn 1 or just a bit of an incorrect line taken. And he's found himself out a lot wider than he would have liked on the marbles and just found himself going a lot wider than initially planned. So not ideal at all there for Lockie Monif, but still in 6th place and able to fight on in this race as Hobbo and Ryan Wood continuing to throw punches at one another. Brent Thompson looks a little stronger on corner exit here, but just not able to build the speed down the straight to really make a challenge into turn 1.
That off-track excursion for Lachlan Manif really only cost him the 1 position. He fell from pit spot back to 6th as we turn our attention back to this battle for the race lead. Now, the other interesting thing was that right behind these two is Christina Nazarick, and she's not really falling back behind them. So Christina Nazarick's pace has actually been pretty good. It's just because she was involved in incidents earlier, and she's ended up a lap down as Hobson looks to the outside at turn 3, switches back to the inside at turn 4. That's super tight between our race leaders. Yet again, Ryan Wood manages to keep the door closed, but Brenton Hobson applying maximum pressure, maximum intimidation to his championship rival as we get into the final quarter of an hour of this race. And the big question for me now, Bo, is what will these two do in terms of pit stops? Will they mirror one another's pit strategy, or will they pit on different laps to try and, in Brenton Hobson's case, get a bit of an advantage from having some clear track?
Well, last time before the pit stops, it was about a 1 second gap separating the two of them. And then after the pit stop phase, it was Brenton Hobson who came out in clean air, was able to put in some decent laps and close up a lot to Ryan Wood. This time around, at his second pit stop, the gap was a lot less than 1 second. So if he can get some really fast laps in now, and Ryan Wood does not react like we saw him last time, Brenton Hobson has every chance of pulling off the move that he couldn't quite get done in the first stint when they came out of the pits neck and neck.
And so he and Brian Van Der Wack are both in on lap number 21. So remember what I said about lap number 21 being the critical lap number? So Brenton Hobson and Brian Van Der Wack have both taken the opportunity to pit at the earliest possible chance to fill up and get through to the checkered flag. What they'll be both hoping for now is a safety car, because if there was to be a safety car now, they'd have an advantage. They've already taken their final pit stop. Everybody else would get trapped out on the circuit behind the safety car.
Oh, well, I wonder if you know how they live in Tokyo for Eddie Beswick there. All kinds of sideways drifting his way through the final corner. Just got a little bit too far in the grass. And I think a bit of a underwear replacement needed there as he dives into the pit lane. Ryan Wood does react immediately, and that was a very aggressive pit entry there. Of course, the actual gap in the fence where you dive into the pit lane here is quite tight, so you have to really thread the needle. And look at that, super, super tight. And Ryan Wood used every millimeter of walls on both sides, maximized it perfectly. And now it's just a case of where does he drop off the jacks? And where is Brenton Hobson in comparison? I'll tell you right now, Brenton Hobson is firing his way into the final corner. I'll keep tabs on him as he exits the final corner, and we'll see where exactly Ryan Wood dives out of the pit lane. Ryan Wood should be about to get off the jacks. He is now rolling and moving towards the pit exit line. And that looks like almost advantage Ryan Wood there. That looks like a bigger gap than there was before. Brenton Hobson is close, but no cigar. It's going to stay exactly as it was before the pit stops. 11 laps on the clock, 12 minutes total. We've got a showdown on our hands.
So Brenton Hobson, he's won the last 3 races in a row, but if he wants to make it 4, he's going to have to pass his championship rival on the racetrack. That's the way the situation is going to play out with just under 12 minutes remaining on the clock. Matt Morris is your race leader at the moment. He has not yet come down pit lane, neither has Lachlan Manif. They are the 2 cars on the racetrack at the moment that still need to come down pit lane for their second pit stop. Of course, Matt Morris ran very long in at the first stint as well, getting excellent fuel range out of his car. There he's on screen at the moment, and he's going to go round for another lap as well, Matt Morris. So what he'll be doing is working on some fuel numbers, and he'll basically come in for the shortest possible pit stop for his second and final pit stop, making sure that he is stationary for the absolute minimum amount of time to take on just enough fuel to get to the checkered flag as Lachlan Manif comes in out of second position.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how that pans out for all of them who are now taking their pit stops now. Just look at the actual pit stop times, though, between these two, Ryan Wood and Brenton Hobson, as it really heats up there in towards turn number 3. Around the outside, the Synergy Sim Racing car will try, but to no avail. I mentioned the super aggressive pit entry that we saw by Ryan Wood, and I think that was a big deciding factor in the end, because their actual stop total of when they were in the pit box was to the 10th of a second exact between the two of them, but Ryan Wood some 3/10 faster in the pit lane transit time. So Ryan Wood really maximized his entry and exit of the pit lane, and that, I think, has just kept him a nose ahead of Brenton Hobson at the moment, who continues to sniff around looking for an opportunity. And how many times have we seen him go for little half moves, just a little look here, a little look there, maybe back out a couple of meters before the braking zone of the corner before launching an attack? Well, with just 10 minutes on the clock now, if he sees an opportunity, he's got to go for it, and he has to commit. So we'll see what he can do as we have a look at Brian van der Wacker and Lockie Mynef. Of course, Lockie lost that position to Brian a little bit earlier when he had a massive off at turn number 1 all by himself, and now he's trying to get a bit of redemption as he works his way through the final corner, get the best exit you can, and see what the cards are played when it comes to the end of the long straight.
Should be a good battle between these two, both of them very keen sim racers. Brian van der Wacker in the route adjacent to where I'm calling this race from. Lockie Manef, of course, the driver who's also had plenty of real-world experience and success in the Australian Formula Ford Championship. So looking forward to a good contest between these two over the closing laps. Oh, as Manef just goes a little bit wide there through turn number 4. You could see the car understeering on the entry into that corner. He'll be looking to try and pressure Brian van der Wacker into a mistake, but van der Wacker certainly knows how to withstand that sort of pressure as this battle continues between our race leaders. Brenton Hobson taking a wide line through turn number 12, the final corner. And yet again, Bo, we're going to be treated to once again a grandstand finish between our two title combatants. And they're going to fight it out tooth and nail for the race victory tonight. You can pretty much forget about all of the other competitors because they're many, many seconds back down the road. These two again showing why they are the class of Just Send It Season 5.
No, absolutely. These two are the top of the top in this series at the moment. I just want to quickly say we cut away from Lockie Mynef 5 seconds too early as he had a monumental slide through one of the very tight and twisty right-left chicanes around Oran Park. But look at this between these two. Brenton Hobson could not get much closer if he tried to the back of Ryan Wood through this very fast section. A laps car, Harrison Dengate in front. He should be a very respectful driver, as he always has been, and get out of the way and leave these two to have a brilliant fight between each other. But a better exit there by Brenton Hobson, just closing up the entire way through this little section. If you're really brave, the inside is an opportunity here, and he thinks about it, he wants to. Can't quite do it though. Ryan Wood goes defensive and just gives himself a very tight line out of this corner indeed. Slightly better exit speed by Brenton Hobson, but it's not the run he really needs. He needs just a little bit more as we see Matt Morris dive into the pits, now already off the Jackson rolling, so he might even file in to a very nice position indeed as Hobbo looks to the outside. Nothing forthcoming yet again, I've got to say, Ryan Wood is driving very defensive, even in places he doesn't necessarily have to. And I think that's giving Hobbo even more of an opportunity than he already has.
And really, really good job from, I think it was Harrison Dengate there, one of the back markers, just sidestepping our two race leaders and making sure that they had clear passage through to continue their battle. Really, really good sportsmanship from him. But how can you take the rise away from this contest for the race lead? Matt Morris, incidentally, having taken his pit stop, has rejoined the racetrack in position number 4. He's about 4 seconds behind Steve Jansen in what will be the contest for the final podium position. And Mitchell McLeod in position number 5. I'm a little bit concerned about his fuel range because, according to our predictions, we've still got 6 laps. We've got a lane change up the inside. Brenton Hobson goes for the move in turn number 12, but he's going to run out of road on the exit. He manages to get the traction out of the corner, and we have a new race leader. But for how long? There's the bumper cam as Ryan Wood nudges Brenton Hobson. They are side by side into turn number 1 with Wood trying to go the long way round, and he's going to be on the wrong side of the road when they get to turn 2, and it's Hobbo who goes back through to reclaim the ascendancy that he has held for the last 4 weeks.
The inside contact between your title protagonists, and Ryan Wood lets the position go. Of course, that was a very optimistic move. But what is the damage to Brenton Hobson's car from that little collision there? As Steve Jansen, we said these two had cleared off. There was no catch in them. Steve Jansen disagrees with us entirely. He's put himself in a great spot. And we've already seen 2 bits of contact between the 2 drivers in front. If there is a third, hello third place Steve Jansen, we'll see what he can do. As another big battle happening side by side. Over the bridge goes Myneef, and Vanderwack around the outside tries Brian. It's a long way around the outside there, but he's pulled it off. Are you kidding me? That could be a fantastic move, but not quite. Still side by side through the S's, now transforms into the inside. And Brian Vanderwacker, that was a brilliant move. Lockie Myneef, though, he wouldn't mind going out at it again, and we'll see what happens into the final corner as these two are neck and neck and duking it out. And he thought about the inside, did Myneef. They're both running incredibly wide. Bump and run side by side down the front straight. They will go again. A fantastic scrap between these two, and it's going to continue all the way to turn number 1. But Lockie Myneef doesn't have the legs, and we'll have to just wait yet another opportunity. But that was a great move by Brian Vanderwacker around the outside.
As we say, Mitchell McLeod and Matt Morris battling as well. There are battles literally everywhere you look on the racetrack at the moment. Every car in the top 10 is fighting for position with somebody else, and it's hard to know for our director, Jay Kennedy, exactly where to focus because there are literally battles everywhere. As we go back to the Vanderwacker versus Myneef contest, just going around the outside of a lapped car there as well. And meanwhile, the battle for second is now on. Steve Jansen, he was 6 or 7 seconds behind the race leaders a couple of laps ago, but he's been punching out lap times faster than the race leaders. He was more than 2 seconds quicker than both Hobson and Wood last time around. So Steve Jansen has got pace to burn in this closing stint, and he's going to challenge for at least second position, possibly even first. Down the inside of Ryan Wood into turn number 1. Has to brake a little bit earlier there, though, because he wasn't quite able to get the overlap. But Wood understeers wide at turn 2, and Jansen is through to second. And as Ryan Wood got problems.
His car's broken. His car is broken, and I think this could be a disaster for Ryan Wood. His front left is off the car. Big damage there. And I hate to say the word, but championship implications there for Ryan Wood. And he is unhappy on the voice chat. 4 minutes to go in this race, and the fireworks have exploded. As we look, it was a bit of an overshoot into turn 1, and Jansen wanted to fill the gap. It was a very big move there from Jansen, but it did cause enormous damage to Ryan Wood, and that is such a championship-changing moment there.
They locked wheels, didn't they, those 2 cars? That's the hit that's done the damage there. Here's Matt Morris, who's now up in a podium position and being pursued by Mitchell McLeod, who is just about to complete his 12th lap of this tank full of fuel. We've still got 2 minutes and 40 seconds left on the clock, so at least another couple of laps to go, and Mitchell McLeod's out of fuel. He pitted too early, for his first and second pit stops. He doesn't have the fuel range to make it to the end, and he's going to have to give up that fourth position and come in for a splash and dash. So that answers the question about Mitchell McLeod and whether or not he was able to make it to the end. No, he wasn't. He's had to come in for stop number 3.
And another driver that has is Harrison Dengate. He wasn't quite able to make it happen either. He's on to his third stop as well. So we can see there another battle between these two. Jonathan Bykoffers. Matt, are you kidding me? What is happening in this race? Matt Morris, the wheel is off the car. And oh, wow, that is so unfortunate for Matt Morris. An incident with what I believe was a lapped car there. We'll try and get a look at who that was. But Matt Morris from third place, a brilliant strategy to go longer than anybody else. And Tyler Howard involved in his own incident. I think the steering is actually broken on his car. You can see, I mean, like the car moved very aggressively right before Morris got there. But I do think the front right was already damaged, but it was a weird final lurch to the right.
Oh, and how lucky were our race leaders not to get caught up in that? That could have so easily been either Brenton Hobson or Steve Jansen out of the race right there. Unbelievably bad luck for Matt Morris, though. Wrong place at the wrong time and getting tangled up with an errant backmarker. That elevates Brian Vanderwacker into a podium position. Now, he did say that if he was to win, he would do a shoey. I'm not sure if we can persuade him to do a shoey for getting a podium, but
that was exactly my question. Go.
Yeah.
But that is a great drive from Brian Vanderwacker, and he's had to really work for it today, hasn't he? He's had all kinds of battles going on, and you can see that he's found himself up some 9 spots from where he started. So a brilliant effort there, and he's just doing a very nice job to go. But let's not count our chickens before they hatch, because Lockie Myneef is not the furthest away behind, and I could still definitely form some kind of a charge in the last lap and a half of this race. And normally I'd like to say, obviously the race is dying down and we're not going to see too much more chaos, but I think what this race has proven is you never know until the checkered flag falls.
So here comes Brenton Hobson. This will be to begin the final lap of the race. And for the driver who has been in crushing form the last few weeks, is actually shaping up to make a bit of history if he can hold on to it for this final lap, Brenton Hobson, because if he can bring it home for the win, he will become the first driver in Just Send It history to win 4 races on the trot. We've seen the likes of Cooper Webster and Jackson Sousa and Harlow win races in succession before, but no drivers ever managed to win 4 in a row. Brenton Hobson just half a lap away from ticking that box.
I know how hard it is to win one of these events, so to try and win 4 in a row from Brenton Hobson is incredible form. It is just truly dominant what he's been able to achieve, and it's no surprise that he finds himself at the top of the championship order provisionally, as this championship is beginning to wind down, only a few rounds to go, and his championship lead looks to only get stronger and stronger as the turns tick down here at Oran Park Raceway. 1 corner to go for the 88, and it's going to be yet another victory for Brenton Hobson. Around the final corner he will come, and again it is Brenton Hobson who takes the checkered flag in a brilliant drive ahead of Steve Jansen in position number 2. How is that battle for position number 3 going? Right now it's looking very good for Brian Vanderwacker through the final section of corners. It's a little bit squirrely through that last section, and Lockie Myneef thinks about the inside, but thinking is all he will do. It's been a great drive from Brian Vanderwacker, and he will round out the podium in yet another round of Just Send It.
Yeah, that's Brian Vanderwacker's first podium in Just Send It. He will be stoked with that, and poor Mitchell McLeod, who had to take that 3rd pit stop, didn't put enough fuel in that final pit stop. That's a disaster for Mitchell McLeod, who was 3rd in the points, let's not forget, coming into this round. So a couple of crucial blows for a couple of our key title contenders, with both Ryan Wood and Mitchell McLeod chalking up non-finishes tonight.
Yep, some big moments indeed, and all kinds of discussions were going after this, but we saw some great battles in there as well. Of course, the likes of Hobson and Ryan Wood were battling so hard for so long in that race, and it was fantastic to see.
Well, what a cracker of a race. Few big moments in that one with championship implications, like you said there, Bo. But in the end, it's Brenton Hobson who gets his 4th race win in a row. Steve Janssen, 3rd podium in a row for him as well. He's chalked up some very, very consistent results lately and playing himself in as a title contender as well. Brian Vanderwacker gets his 1st podium, just manages to hold out Lachlan Manif by 0.4 of a second. Hayden Veld in 5th position ahead of Jonathan Bykoff. Good drive from Daniel Yeaman, who started a little bit further down the order. 9 positions gained for him, 11 positions gained for Jonathan Bykoff, and 16 positions gained by Aidan Brand, who came from 24th on the grid up into 8th position at the finish. Reece Cohen comes home in 9th position, and Christian Lindbom completes your top 10.
Mitchell McLeod would roll very slowly into 11th place. I don't even think he rolled to 11th place, but we'll give it to him anyway. Tyson McAvoy in position number 12, with Eddie Beswick up 17 spots in 13th. Christina Nazarick and Ian Quass would be our top 15 in this race, with Brad Vaughan, Tom Mitchell in 16th and 17th. And of course, a lot of these drivers are a few laps down, and that includes Tom Wilkinson, Harrison Dengate, and Matt Morrison 20th.
And then the big story, Ryan Wood, one of our title protagonists, position number 21, not seeing the checkered flag tonight. Tyler Howard in 22nd. He was a driver in the thick of the action this evening. Poor result as well for Mario Vartanian, a driver who we normally see somewhere inside the top 10. Byron Phillips was part of the front-running battle early on, but got caught in some dramas, as did Hugh Barter. Matthew Kiefer in position 26, back to Jaden Russell. Ryan Ullman in 28th, Joel Chigavazira not finishing, and our admin Simon Black classified in at position number 30 on the timing board, and that is season number 5, week number 9 for the Just Send It Sim Racing Series presented by Logitech G. Custom track art and owned 3D game streaming complete. Hope you've enjoyed all of the action this evening. You've been watching it on the SimSpeed TV network. My thanks to our producer, Jay Kennedy, my co-commentator, Bo Albert, and everybody who has tuned in tonight. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Lockie Mansell. See you next week for more Just Send It action.
This is fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction. He's got rhythm. Both of them. Maloney.
Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up top.
Oh my God. Oh. Big crash. Oh my goodness. Half the field's going to get rolled.
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no. That's massive. This is it. This is over. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
God, what?